Welcome to Moon Me, an astrology podcast where we explore astrology, tarot, psychology, and astrocartography. With your hosts, Roxy and Izzy, we dive into the connection between the stars and the self. Hello and welcome. I'm Roxy.
And I'm Izzy.
And this is Moon Me, an astrology podcast. Today we're recording episode 6, which is titled The Planets. Today we're going to get into what your planets mean in your natal chart, how it might be affected in transits, and basically go through each planet and talk a little bit about how those energies might come through for you based on modalities, elements, and maybe even some fun examples. So, Izzy, I wonder if you could kick us off. Tell us a little bit about what the planets mean to you as an astrologer in terms of the natal chart and transits.
Yeah, so the planets are really, really important in the natal chart and in astrology in general. To me, they really represent how each area of life and how each part of our personality is kind of colored.
Mm.
Is it's like the flavor that we have. In terms of our personality and in terms of our experiences. Whereas the houses are a bit more cut and dry. The planets have a lot of themes that, and they're so important because the planets, they rule the different zodiac signs. And then each house is associated with a different zodiac sign. And so the planets are really where it all begins, in
Mm.
my opinion. What do you
Yeah,
think?
for sure. I think we need to look at the combination of the sign and the planet. I think as much as it is, our teachers, our the way we express our energy, depending on the house, how we relate to certain areas of our lives. But I also think, depending on the planet, it can be quite personal. It can really, make up our identity, how we see ourselves, how we express our personality, and how we use our energy in the world. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree.
Mhm.
It like because each planet like kind of expresses itself in a different way. And what we're going to get into, we have like the social planets, the personal planets, and all of that. And so it's kind of important to understand the distinction between them to
Mhm.
understand how they're kind of categorized and why that matters.
Yeah. Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. There's a few terms that we can use for it. Most of the time, you'll hear inner and outer planets. Could you tell us a little bit about that and why they are distinct from each other?
Yeah, I guess, yeah, most people think about the inner and outer planets. And so I guess we could start with that. The inner planets are like, Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars. Um, and those kind of more are individual to us. They're a bit more personal to us. Like
Mm.
they say more about our personality and our approach to life. And then the outer planets, um, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, tend to be more on the generational level, and show traits of people born within a certain period of time.
Mhm.
Um, and so, yeah, what do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would say that we have our personal planets, then our social planets, and then our transpersonal planets, right? So our personal planets, I guess, would be a little bit more close to home. Essentially, it would be how we act, how we feel, how our identity, as I mentioned before. So these would be like Mercury, Venus, Mars. And then, you have your social planets, which are more about how we relate to others, what our responsibilities are with others. And then, of course, those outer planets, as you said, the generational ones. I think that's where we kind of transcend our sense of self. There's this sense of breaking out of the ego and self-identifying, and it's more about larger meaning, larger collective I would say, connection between larger groups of people. And these are the planets that we can really see change patterns in larger groups of people, right? So when we have major Pluto transits, we can look at the collective and see how it might be affecting a lot of us. And although, those kinds of transits really do affect us differently based on the house we find them in, I think the signs and that collective energy does get us a little bit out of ourselves, bigger picture. So very important to have a distinction between the two when trying to predict how we might be affected, and how that energy might be expressed even in our natal charts. So I wonder, Izzy, if you could tell us a little bit more about the difference between our natal chart in terms of the planets and the difference between a transit.
Yeah, so the natal chart is pretty much fixed. It is like the snapshot of the moment in time when you were born on this earth and where all the planets, luminaries, celestial bodies were placed in the natal chart in that moment. And the natal chart itself never really changes. I mean, yes, if we get really technical, we could talk about progressions and all of that, but when we talk about the natal chart itself, it doesn't change. It's fixed in time. Um, and it's our guide that we could keep referring back to for life. Whereas the transits show basically the planets that are moving currently right now. Where are they passing through in our relative to our birth chart? And so how are they influencing us right now? And we could even use them in a predictive way to
Mhm,
see how will they influence us in the future.
mhm,
I want to add that personally, I don't know how you feel, Roxy, but like for me, I don't think a transit can be used to predict something so exact. But it could really give us a sense of how we're going to be feeling or the types of events that we might go through.
mhm,
Um, because sometimes as an astrologer, people will come to me and be like, wh where and when am I going to meet my husband? And I'm like, I could tell you when it would be most fortuitous to find love, but I can't tell you exactly where and when.
mhm.
So I know it's a little off topic, but what do you think about that? What do you
Yeah,
think
no,
about?
I really, I do agree with that. Sometimes it really is on the nose, though. I love those astrology moments where, um, you couldn't have made a better prediction because it's so literal. For example, I don't know, Pluto in the seventh house, and you go through a divorce or you get married. So yeah, there are times where we can predict certain experiences you might have, but it's usually in a collective energy, right? So we could say you might experience this, you might experience that, and definitely we know what the energy might be feeling like, and what you might have to confront in terms of energetically speaking or emotionally speaking when it comes to transits. It is a great way to prepare, but in terms of precise prediction of experiences, it's not really possible, and I think it would be irresponsible for us to claim that we can do that. But certainly facilitate an understanding of what to expect, right?
Yeah, I think it gives a really good idea of like what life might look like in that moment, the kind of experiences they might be going through, but just like if they want like an exact day and time and place, it's like with astrology, we could give a lot of information, but to know exactly what, like who, what, where, when is like a bit unrealistic in my opinion. And it is irresponsible, I would say.
Absolutely, absolutely. But for example, what would you say is the difference between like having moon in the seventh house, and a transit going through the moon transit going through the seventh house?
So like if one has a moon in the seventh house in their natal chart, typically, they would always pretty much a big part of their identity and being would have to do with like connecting to others on a deep level, on a close level, like having close one-to-one connections, I would say. Um, And also being very receptive to the needs of the person or people that they're dealing with. I find that a lot of people with moon in the seventh house, whether in a birth chart or, I also do astrocartography, so in a relocated chart, they tend to work really well with clients,
Mm-hmm.
as counselors, astrologers, healers. And that's kind of their overall, like a big part of their personality, because the moon is the part of the big three, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if someone's going through a moon in the seventh house transit, they may feel themselves in a period of like kind of needing maybe that emotional closeness for a few days or a few weeks or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not like in like a major, it's not necessarily a major part of their personality, right?
Absolutely.
So it's more temporary,
Mm.
tends to be more temporary, but it still has an impact. I feel like transits, um, at least for me, I feel like tend to have a pretty strong impact, especially in the angular houses. I've found that transits in the angular houses, like first house, fourth house, seventh house, and 10th, have a huge impact. In the other houses too, but just I've just noticed with myself and clients, transits happening in the angular houses like are very, very strong and felt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And, just listening to what you're saying, and I would add to that by saying, it does feel like the natal chart planets are lifelong lessons, whether it's personal and it's an internal lesson, whether it's experiences you're going to have on regular basis, depending on the house and the sign. And transits do feel more temporary. Now, of course, it depends. If we're looking at the inner planets, those transits happen a lot more quickly. If you're looking at the
Those
outer
planets
planets,
move more quickly.
right, it's going to take a little bit longer to go through that transit. So
A,
it can
a
feel
little bit or a lot of it.
a
Like
lot of it.
I think we have
Um,
18 or 19 years left of the current Pluto transit. I mean, that's a long
exactly.
time.
Yeah.
Like that
Yeah.
is a long time,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Yeah. I think as well as that, it's this sense of even shorter transits can change our lives. They can change the trajectory of our lives. And in some ways, I think it's quite beautiful because I feel like those are sort of passages and things that we need to go through in order to move forward and to learn the lessons that are in our natal chart as well, which is why I think we get more impacted when transits make conjunctions over our personal planets or our natal chart planets. It's there to provoke change, and sometimes that's quite large, impactful changes. But that doesn't change the fact that they are a little bit less temporary, I would say, in terms of the intensity of the energy than the planets in our natal chart.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we move on and start chatting a little bit about the planets, why would you say understanding the planets is really important as opposed to just knowing our sun sign?
I think it's just it's important because um it's a way to like know ourselves on a much deeper level. On a much deeper level. Once you understand the themes, the challenges and the gifts that come with the sign associated with a certain planet in your chart, the sign and house placement, um, you go on the way to self-mastery, I think. No.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't believe you could achieve like full self-mastery. Like we're always learning and developing and evolving, but um, I just think it's really important because knowing the planets really allows you to identify your traits and your tendencies, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, I would add to that to say that if you are diving into your planets to understand yourself, keep an eye out for stelliums. If you have more than one planet in a sign, check out the house, check out the sign. It's probably going to give you a lot of insight into like core focuses in your life, and sometimes, depending on the planets, obstacles that you would need to overcome. But I think it's quite an empowered space when you look at yourself with that level of awareness and you're able to take that awareness and use it as a guide to navigate some of those difficult times or easy times, to focus on our strengths, and maybe at times even see, what could your career look like? Where could you be more successful? What skills can you work on or create balance within your chart based on your planets in order to be a balanced person and move forward towards your goals in a way that's more practical, more constructive, and will get you there faster, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah,
All
definitely.
right. So, Izzy, if you're all right, I'd like to get started on chatting about each of the planets. And of course, we're going to start with the good old favorite, Sun. Now, we know our sun is associated with our identity. There is a bit of that core self mentality when it comes to the sun. It's definitely about your ego, your vitality. What does the sun mean to you, and how do you think it shows up both in the natal chart and the transit charts?
I think the sun, I think of the sun like in the literal sense that it's shining, right? And
Mm,
I think where the sun is placed in your chart, like especially the house, really shows kind of an area of life where you might like gain recognition more easily, the
mm-hmm,
area of life where you might really stand out to people, what you might get noticed for. Um, and also, I think the sign it's in kind of with the sun, those traits also it's kind of like what you get known for as well. Um,
mm-hmm,
so like if you're, a Pisces sun, like you might be known for being like a bit like more spiritual, more intuitive,
mm-hmm.
um, really trusting your gut kind of person. Um, so I really think that to me, in addition to your identity and your ego and all of that, it also shows like it reveals like where you shine and where you gain recognition. In addition to that. So,
Yeah.
what do you think?
Yeah, I would also say, it has a great deal to do with our expression, which is similar to what you're saying, right? You get known in a certain way for aspects related to your sun sign, including the house, which we can't really understand the planets in isolation necessarily. We do have to look at the house and the sign. So, if we're thinking about expression being such a great indicator of the sun, I would say, for example, if you have your sun in a fire sign, your expression is going to probably be a little bit more overt, a little bit more eye-catching, attention-grabbing, as opposed to an earth sun, which would be more grounded, a little bit less expressive, perhaps, a little bit more comfortable in being a little bit more private or being a little bit more composed. So you can see between the two elements how that could be drastically different in terms of our expression and our ego and what we're known for, as you said. How would you distinguish between, let's say, the modalities, cardinal, mutable, and fixed signs?
Oh, I love this. I feel like, yeah, cardinal people, I feel like they have a lot of like that no nonsense energy to them.
Hmm.
Like get it done, get it started. I think we talked about this in another episode. Like they're the type of people that might be like, "Oh, you're feeling down, just go for a run." And I just want to cry and eat popcorn. I don't want to go for a run.
I feel like
Um,
that's your water sign, no?
yeah, like I and they also, yeah, I feel like they have quite, especially not all the cardinal signs, but I feel like especially Aries and Capricorn have a lot of energy. I feel like some cardinal signs have a lot of energy, have high energy levels and a lot of drive. Um, and yeah, I would say that there is also this ability to take initiative. Like I feel like cardinal signs, like they won't be afraid to make the first move, maybe in a
Hmm.
friendship or a relationship. There is really this sense of taking initiative and action and taking action that's
Hmm.
very like hallmark of the
Hmm.
cardinal sun signs in particular.
Yeah, I feel like there's this sense of life force energy. You know, the sun sign can very much be how you express that life force energy. So, yeah, if you have that cardinal sign or even a fire sign in the sun placement, I think that you would have that like natural life force energy. You might be more energetic when you talk, when you interact with others, and how you go about your life, right? What about the fixed signs and the mutable signs?
I think, well, I mean, I'm a fixed sun sign myself. I think with the fixed signs, um, they are motivated similar to the cardinal signs, but in a different way. Um, there's a lot of willpower and staying power and um commitment
Hmm.
and a willingness to follow through with commitments.
Yeah,
So I think fixed sun signs are tend to be quite reliable
yeah.
and they stand by their word. Um, Something that cardinal signs and mutable signs may not do as much because cardinal signs like ideas,
Hmm.
but they may not be the best at following through with the idea. The fixed signs may take a bit longer to get started because they understand what commitment really is. But once they get going, they're really steadfast with that, you
Yeah.
know.
I think, you know, there's an essence around a fixed sign sun where they're pretty sure of themselves. They know what they think, they know how they feel, and you can feel that sort of emanating off of them.
They know who they are too. They know who
Yeah.
they
As opposed to mutable signs, which can be quite changeable. You might even notice it in conversations with them. They might also have quite changeable energy. So, when motivated and passionate about something, you might see that life force energy pick up, as opposed to when they're demotivated and that life force energy drops. You might see a little bit more, I think, of an incline and decline in that.
Yeah, I think and it's more like yeah, a lot more ups and downs whereas a fixed sign might go through periods of release like long-term depression or long-term happiness. Mutable signs, it's more up and down even throughout one day they could go through ups and downs.
Absolutely. As a mutable sun myself, that's definitely the case for me. I've learned to ride the wave. When I'm highly motivated, I do it. Because if I wait, I might hit a dip and not get it done. You know. Yeah, so what about transits? I mean, the sun goes through out all 12 houses, the 12 zodiac signs throughout the year. How would you say that a transit would impact a person?
A sun transit, you mean?
Yes.
Um, I mean, I think the sun transits are definitely a bit different from the sun in the natal chart. I think that sun and also Mercury transits, for example, like really show where your attention should be directed, where your energy, where your life force energy should be being put at the moment. And it could also show where you're kind of gaining recognition, and where you might be more visible in the area of life where you might be more visible at a given time. What do you think?
Yeah, I think where the sun goes, it illuminates. So I think it's very profound to look at the houses that the sun's transiting through throughout the year, because you're gonna face different aspects of your life and in the duration of 1 year. You know, first house sun transit, you're gonna be illuminated, as you said. You might also make some realizations about your personal style, about sometimes your health. You might make some changes even based on those realizations. And as it moves through the houses, you could confront those different topics, right? So next would be second house. Maybe you're looking a little bit more at your finances, realizing some things, making changes there. And as it goes throughout, you know, I would speak on sun transits through the sixth house, for example. This is a time to elevate your health, you know, transit through the eighth house. This is a time to, you know, deal with letting go. What needs to be let go? What needs to be cleared out? For example, 10th house, career. What are you doing for work? How are you focusing on your goals? How are you putting yourself out there? You know, all of those sun transits can be quite, you could use it as a guide, I would say, to look at all areas of your life throughout the year. Yeah.
Yeah, because each transit with the sun transits lasts like roughly about a month.
Hmm.
So it's nice to look at them because each month there's maybe a different life area that you should be honing in on.
Exactly. You know, I just had this idea right now in this moment. I think I'm going to implement it into my life. I think every season, so every house it transits, I'm going to write some goals based on that house and maybe really focus in on working with the energy throughout the year. So, for example, where's the sun right now? I'm trying to think, where is it in our
Sagittarius.
chart? In the
Oh,
12th
the
house.
12th.
Yeah. For
Yeah.
example, I might write some goals this month about like uncovering unconscious patterns, looking at my patterns and my driving forces, looking at the parts of myself I suppress. And then when the sun goes into, my first house in Capricorn season, maybe here I'm going to focus more on my style, on the way that I'm projecting myself. I have an issue with resting bitch face. Capricorn season could be the season I work on that. My delivery could be softer. I could work on that. So, I think I'm going to implement that. How does that sound?
Yeah, I've been, I was so busy, with I recently moved from one place to another, and I was so busy with that, and I feel like I was just on autopilot and not paying attention to anything but that, but getting the house
Fair.
ready. But now that I'm more settled in, I've got, this lovely, I want to just pull it out so the whole audience can see this lovely notebook that Miss Roxy got me for my birthday,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna start using it to probably do the same to write about how my astrology is affecting me and what I'm feeling now and what I want to do with that energy. Because right now, like with all this 12th house stuff going on, because we both are Cap rising, so Sag is our 12th house,
Yeah.
and I've been feeling very not really like make I haven't been feeling so much like putting myself out there and like being very public and doing things like that. I feel like more in a planning phase. I'm more in
Mm,
like a behind the scenes phase right now this month. And it makes a lot of sense.
it
And then I've
does.
been, planning a couple of launches for my business. And so I was, talking about it with someone and I was like, January feels more like not only is it going to be 2026, a new year, but it's also just like, again, the sun is going to be in my first house. And I feel like I will have more drive to put things out there that I've been working on for so long.
Absolutely. That's your time to step forward and put those, unconscious or those hidden, shall we say, those things you do in private, those things you're planning in private, that's the time to put it into action. And I love the progression because, look at your chart and see when is the sun in the first house. That could be seen as like the beginning of your year, because you're kind of doing that, you're going through and then you're working on your finances, right? And then after your finances, you're working on your communication, your thought patterns, your short-term travel, maybe your car or your train tickets that you buy every month. And then fourth house, now you're working on your house. I think it could really be helpful to look at the seasons that way and start using the energy instead of, at times fighting it, because for example, with the sun in your 12th house, you might be feeling, oh, why am I isolating? Why am I feeling like this? Instead, knowing the sun's there, you can use that energy and go, well, I'm going to use it to plan. I'm going to set
Yeah,
myself up for a great year.
direct it within instead
Hmm.
of just like kind of pondering on it.
Yeah, or avoiding it, right? Because I think that's what happens a lot with 12th house, 8th house, and 6th house placements, sometimes fourth as well. I think those energies can be a little bit difficult to deal with. They involve a certain amount of isolation and dealing with
What's
the,
going on inside,
there we
literally.
go. There we go. Yeah. Okay, I love that. So I'm going to do that. All right. Anyways, moving on to the moon, our emotions, our inner world. It tells us so much, right, Izzy? It tells us like our emotional needs. It tells us even subconscious patterns, similarly to the 12th house. What does the moon mean for you?
Definitely, I would say it represents what we need emotionally to feel well and fulfilled emotionally.
Safe.
Safety, com what gives us comfort,
Mm,
like emotional stability, what gives us comfort, what gives us emotional stability. Um, as well as I would say how we relate to others on a deeper level.
mhm,
I know Venus is more how we kind of attract those people and what attracts us to them, but I think the moon is more like emotional resonance, um, deep emotional ties and connections and bonds, I would
mhm.
say.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, the moon to me, I've always, I mean, our podcast is called Moon Me. I don't know. I feel like the moon is so important in astrology. So, so, so very important.
absolutely. Yeah, it tells us a lot about, even our inner child and our attachment styles and what we need in terms of how we take care of ourselves. You mentioned Venus. I think Venus can indicate how we feel taken care of by others and how we take care of others. The moon sign can reveal a little bit about how we take care of ourselves or lack thereof. Difficult moon placements, for example, moon in the seventh house, can sometimes mean that we neglect our own needs a little bit because it's directly opposing the first house. But that would just
Focused
be an
on
example.
other.
That would just be an example, right? For example, I have moon in the 12th house, so it can really indicate, that I am quite private emotionally and I don't reach out necessarily for help when I'm going through emotional things, very emotionally in tune. But at the same time, it can be quite psychologically taxing. Intuitive as well. I don't want to just speak bad on my moon placement. But yeah, the moon really reveals a lot about how we take care of ourselves and how we interpret our own inner world, how we interpret our emotions. For example, my Sag moon, there can be times where I want to neglect that, where I want to move on quickly and I don't fully process or feel. Whereas a Cancer moon would be really good, perhaps at taking care of themselves and protecting themselves and awareness of how they're feeling and processing that. I think the water moons are generally pretty good at that. What would you say?
I would say yes, but some water moons, like Moon in Scorpio, feel everything like times 1,000.
It's hard. Yeah.
And I see in, my partner, my fiance has a Scorpio moon, and I see that in him. Like sometimes, like it feels like the whole world is falling apart over whether it's something big or small. It's like yeah, some water moons like really have heavy emotions. So
Hmm.
it's like I think they're good at facing their emotions, and acknowledging them instead of bypassing them, definitely, but like it could be very heavy.
Yeah, I mean, it could be argued that that's why they're good at processing their emotions because they actually feel it. They let themselves feel it completely, as
Yeah.
opposed to like an air moon that I think would be a little
Me.
bit more, yeah, a little bit more detached from their emotions and not necessarily internalize their emotional world so much. What would you say about that?
Yeah, us air moons, I think we're like I feel like we try to like verbally explain and rationalize our emotions,
Mm-hmm.
whereas like that's just not how it works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think like an air moon would be really great at communicating how they feel, why they feel it, analyzing other people's behaviors and that effect on them. But when it comes to feeling, there might be a little bit of an avoidance or detachment from actually embodying what they're feeling, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And if you had to think about the modalities as well, if you think about like a cardinal moon, they might be quite reactive. They might be quite, what's the word? Yeah, reactive, expressive in terms of how they feel. It might be a quicker, they might get over their emotions quite quickly. Whereas fixed moon, I feel like would be more,
They hold on. They hold
yeah.
on. My mother is an Aquarius moon, so fixed air. I'm a Libra moon, and it's exactly that. Like, I may react quite harshly to certain things, like in the moment,
Mhm.
but like maybe a day later, I don't care anymore. But
Hmm.
my mom is an Aquarius moon and she like will stay mad for a while.
Yeah.
She'll cut people off more easily than I will.
I think a
Um,
Scorpio moon could be mad for life, for example.
yeah, my fiance, yeah,
Fixed water.
definitely,
Do
definitely, they
not
don't let
cross a
things
Scorpio
go.
moon.
I think like fixed moons like definitely have more trouble letting go.
Yeah,
Definitely.
absolutely. Absolutely. Mutable moons, similar to the sun sign in terms of life energy, the mood fluctuation, I think could happen quite a bit. With my mutable sun and moon, that's very much the case with me. But I find with my emotions, I just ride the wave. And this is my advice for all mutable moons out there. If you feel something, ride the wave. Get to the peak of the emotion and then wait for that to pass before you react. Because what we often find with mutable moons is that you get to the peak and that's when you want to react and that's when you want to like express it. But the truth is, give it a bit of a moment, ride the wave a little bit, and probably you're going to be over it in a couple of hours, even less, depending on the moon. So that would be my advice to mutable moons. And then for fixed moons, I mean, there needs to be a lesson in letting go here, I would say. Can be really difficult to let go.
Yeah, because like when you hold on, it kind of hurts you inside. Like I feel like health wise, people never talk about this, but when you hold on to pain and suffering and resentment, it like kind of eats you alive, low
Yeah.
key.
If you
I
don't
I mean
actively, yeah.
I don't have a fixed moon, but I have a Scorpio stellium. In the 11th house, so I've been burned by people, like men, like like especially, but just in general, I've been burned.
Hmm.
I admit it, I've been burned. And letting go of that resentment it took a lot of work.
Hmm.
But you end up hurting yourself inside when you hold on to that resentment because I feel like you just keep attracting those kind of people because
Yeah.
you're kind of expecting it to happen.
Yeah, I think that's how I kind of connect the moon and the 12th house, is that sense of what you just said, right? You internalize a thought, an idea, pattern, and then that internalization of that pattern becomes what you expect from the world and what you seek out, right? It's unconscious drives to your behavior. So, yeah, for our fixed moons out there, really looking into that would really help you overcome certain patterns that you're uncomfortable with or that's hurting you. This is true for 12th house as well. I have a moon in the 12th house and I've had to do a lot of work there, right? So, yeah, I think it can be really helpful to break down those pains, let some of them go, especially those that are not for you anymore. But speaking of how we relate to others, would you say that the moon sign is more important than, let's say, the sun sign when it comes to our relationships with people?
When it comes to our relationships, yeah, definitely. Because like I said, it's like what you need, your emotional needs, that's a huge component of relationships.
Hmm.
And also like how it's how you relate to others as well. Um, I feel like if the moon signs and house placements are incompatible, um, maybe on the surface you could get along, but when it comes to the next level of that deepening the relationship, it probably won't work.
Yeah. I've connected with people where our sun signs aren't necessarily compatible, but our moon signs or Venus signs are, and the relationship has been incredibly, compatible and works well. So I think the sun sign is interesting. It's good to know, but I think when it comes to deeper connection, like you said, the moon sign is definitely going to play a very big role, right? All right. So, what about Mercury? We associate Mercury with the mind, with thinking and also communicating, of course. Also, the way we learn, right? What would you associate with the Mercury planet?
Yeah, definitely the way we think, the way we learn, the way we process information in general. Um, yeah, our thinking style and our psychology, the motive behind the why, the way, like why we take our actions, why we approach situations and people in a certain way.
Mhm.
Um, I think Mercury cannot be overlooked in a birth chart. Um, and I think the Mercury sign really, really like sometimes I have a bad habit of like looking at the charts of like serial killers and like I've noticed that a lot of them have um like fixed Mercuries.
Interesting.
Makes sense. It makes sense because it's like there's like a goal,
Yeah, fixed
and
Mercury
like
is
an
super
obsession,
focused.
and like an obsession, and they typically focus on a certain type of victim and a certain type of person or people, and are very, yeah, I've noticed this like a lot of serial killers with Scorpio Mercury. I have Scorpio Mercury. I swear I haven't hurt anyone, but Scorpio Mercury with Taurus Mercury too.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
Um, I've noticed those are the biggest, and as well as Aquarius Mercury. Leo Mercury as well, but I just in general, especially I would say the ranking is like Scorpio and Taurus, and then Aquarius, and then Leo. But I just see a lot of that. So you could what I'm trying to get at is you could see a lot and understand a lot about a person's motives and the way that they think
Mm.
and their psychology and the rationale behind what they do by looking at their Mercury and the Mars, but the Mercury especially.
Mm. Like if you had to think of the air signs and the earth signs, that would be very like logical, right? The way they approach things, very analytical, very logical. Whereas a water sign or a fire sign, they might be more impulsive, more emotional in the way that they perceive things, which it can show up even in the way we learn. You know, when a fire sign and I'm talking about Mercury specifically, fire or water, when they feel deeply connected to the content they're learning, they might learn quicker, for example. Whereas an air or earth sign, they might find structure and understanding foundations better in terms of learning, right? And then, as you were saying about the fixed sign, that makes a lot of sense. I would associate fixed signs with intense focus and durability in terms of what they're focused on, right? Whereas a mutable sign,
Even to the point of obsession.
right, that could make sense. Not always for the listeners. You're not all going to be serial killers, but for sure I could see that pattern working well with someone, you know, even someone who's working on their goals or their career, you know, the fixed Mercury signs, it can really help with that durability as opposed to, you know, mutable signs, which would be very changeable, as we've mentioned before. Very flexible, though, very adaptable. New information means new perspective, whereas a fixed sign might need to sit with that new information a little bit longer before allowing it to inform their perception of the world or of content in general.
Yeah, mutable energy, I feel like could like I've noticed like even if a person has a lot of fixed energy, like if a lot of fixed planets, certain placements in a mutable sign will completely change that commitment and durability in a
Hmm.
fixed sign person. I've noticed it in myself because
Hmm.
I have a lot of fixed energy, but my south node is immutable and my Mars is mutable.
Hmm.
And I've actually changed careers and all of that several times.
Mm.
And it surprises people, but here I am.
Yeah, I mean, I think mutable combined with fixed energy can be quite powerful because you have that fixed nature to achieve the goals, and then you have the mutability to adapt along the way. I think that can be great in terms of success. You know, I also like to think about Mercury in relation to others. I mean, it is a personal planet, but at the end of the day, the way we communicate, it can be expressed through our Mercury sign. So, what would you say specifically about maybe misunderstandings in
Yeah.
relationships, sorry, and how that could be informed by a Mercury sign?
Um, I definitely think like I've noticed in certain dynamics with people um I remember like I have a friend, I believe she has I know you have Pisces Mercury too, don't you?
It's
Well,
shocking, really.
I have another friend that has Pisces Mercury, and um I I just I don't know. I always felt like with plans, like she really liked a lot of flexibility and like would take her time and would would be she liked that maybe we would meet and say we were doing plan A, but then we would do something completely different. And I was always fine with it, but there were other friends in our circle that like would get really frustrated with that.
Hmm.
And I think that has to do with like the Pisces Mercury, which is so mutable and changeable, and also it's water, so it's like really flowing with the currents. Like they kind of do what they feel like doing, regardless of what other people want or regardless of what the plan was.
Hmm.
And that's just one example of like when Mercury styles of communication and thinking clash. Because if you have a Pisces Mercury, which is very flexible, very intuitive, very changeable, very adaptable, with like a more fixed Mercury, like let's say Mercury in Taurus, or even like an Earth Mercury, like Mercury in Virgo, which might be so
Or
like, oh,
Capricorn.
this. I love Virgo. I feel like Virgo people and Virgo Mercury have this tendency to say this. I just had this idea in my head of how it would be.
Yeah.
Right? Right? You
Which is
know?
interesting because they're mutable, right?
Yeah, they are mutable, but I just think that they're very also, and they are the
Earthy.
opposite, but they're the opposite axis of Pisces, and Pisces is very idealistic,
Mm.
but in a different way than Virgo. Virgo is idealistic in a way that's more like that they get fixated on the idea.
Mm.
Even though they're not a fixed sign, they get fixated on the idea and the execution of the idea. So you combine maybe a Pisces Mercury with a Taurus Mercury or a Virgo Mercury or even a Capricorn Mercury, and it might not work. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Um,
absolutely.
and myself being a Scorpio Mercury, um, again, I really think that mutable South Node and my mutable Mars makes me very flexible. But there are some times where like internally I'm like, oh, but this was the plan. Like, but I'm not gonna say it, but I'm thinking it. I'm
I'm
hiding it.
feeling it.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
know, so like there could definitely be a clash. I think Mercury signs, whenever I do like couples readings, like or just I'm giving advice about romance, I always say like don't only focus on Venus and the moon. Like Mercury matters too because it's like literally the way you think. And
Communicate.
sometimes having the same Mercury sign as your partner isn't a good thing. Because like for example, my partner and I feel like our point of conflict is we both have Mercury and Scorpio, and we both could be very stubborn with our thinking.
Mm.
So it's like that's another thing. You might want a Mercury sign that balances you out a bit more.
Yeah, surprisingly, something that works with me and my guy is the Gemini Mercury and Pisces Mercury, which is
They're both mutable,
shocking,
but
but
they're both
mutable. Yeah. So there's a lot of flexibility in the way we communicate. Not to say we don't have issues because it's Pisces and it's Gemini, you know, but at the end of the day, that mutability, I think, saves us every time. We also get over things a little bit quickly, you know. So there's not a lot of dwelling. But for example, you know, an Aries Mercury and a Pisces Mercury, for example, in my case, I find Aries Mercury quite daunting. I struggle to communicate sometimes because it does feel too intense for me.
yeah, there is this aggressiveness that they give
Right.
off
They have a
all
need
the
to
time.
express, and I have a need to have space, right? So there's always these difficulties when it comes to that. And in this case, it is a cardinal fire sign and a mutable water sign. So these are the kind of things, you know, when it's different modalities and different elements can cause a lot of problems.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
All right. So Mars. right? Mars, we tend to associate with our drives, our instincts, our desires. Sometimes the way we have sex, the way we respond to things, or rather react to things in the moment, our motivation, right? What would you associate with Mars?
All of that definitely, but also like how we respond to conflict, how we respond when challenged, how we battle. It is the warrior spirit. And also I've said this in other episodes, like to me, it's a huge part of our energy overall and our aura, I believe.
Yeah,
I feel like I
absolutely.
sense a lot about a person's spirit and their kind of vibe from the Mars sign, definitely.
Yeah.
More than the other signs a lot of the time.
For this one, I really do want to focus a little bit on the transits because Mars transits can be quite
Hard.
intense,
They're
right?
hard. They're hard. I feel like they're always pretty difficult.
Right. So, for example, Mars going through the seventh house, it can indicate, conflict with partners, with connections. It can also indicate, for example, a heightened energy and motivation in that area, which can be quite a positive thing if there's work to be done, things to be fixed, and ways to move forward. But it can also represent, Mars represents like cutting. So it could also represent endings or difficulties, sometimes physical, sometimes emotional. So depending on the house, I think the transits can be quite intense and quite transformational. What would you say are some of like the more difficult Mars transits, or at least more impacting Mars transits?
Um, I would say Mars in the seventh house because I went through that last winter, and at the time my relationship was like felt like it was on the rocks,
Yeah,
honestly. Um, and I think a lot of other people with that same transit have said the same thing.
yeah.
Luckily we got through it, but it was really hard. Um, I would also say Mars in the 10th house could be really tough because
Mm-hmm.
it could be like, to me, I've seen with people who have Mars transiting their 10th, it's like there's either some kind of stagnation in their career and they like are wanting to kind of take action and push forward, but there might be some resistance, or it's just like a sudden maybe getting laid off, getting fired. Because like you said, it's cutting. Um, and Mars in the 12th house, I mean, I have this in my natal and it's my hardest placement, I think. Um,
Yeah, that would be tough.
because it's like you feel very repressed in your anger and you tend to bottle up your anger and you felt because it's usually stems from childhood that you felt like you couldn't express yourself fully and express your anger and you were taught that like you couldn't show anger and frustration and so with Mars in the 12th house it's like you feel um almost like there's like tape on your lips all the time
Mm,
when dealing with difficult people. Um, you feel like fear of your own anger that you might go from 0 to 100.
mm,
Um, and we can really pop off.
yeah. Yeah, I can
Like,
believe that.
but we don't usually do it because we're so scared of what is like, because the 12th house is the house of the unknown, and it's like we don't know the extent to which our anger could come forward.
Yeah,
And
the
I think
12th house is quite hidden from us.
And I think having a Mars 12th house transit is really hard because it like it's kind of like it's kind of like you're dealing with something really difficult, but you feel like you can't express what it is and make sense of what it is and show your feelings around it and your anger. It's like it's all buried beneath the surface. I think probably Mars in the 12th or the 7th is probably the hardest Mars transit in my opinion. Being that I have 12th house Mars natal. Yeah, it's very
Yeah.
hard. My hardest placement in the chart for sure.
Yeah, I mean, just to like give another example to further indicate what you're saying is, if Mars is in the first house, for example, the way we come across to other people could be quite intense or quite, conflict prone or, I can't think of the word in this moment for some reason, but there's this sense of,
Like off-putting, maybe.
yeah, right. Whereas in the 12th house, it's so hidden from others and from ourselves that it's like this under the surface, fiery.
But we feel it. We feel
Exactly. And can be quite anxiety provoking because, with the 12th house, there's this sense of not knowing where that fiery energy is coming from. And in that case, when we can't label it, can very much turn to anxiety, if not taken care of at least. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's like a very, very difficult placement to have. I have not, I have yet to fully master it.
Yeah.
It's a hard one, very hard one.
It is tough, I imagine. You just going back sort of to the natal chart, as you were saying, with your personal placement, if we have to think about Mars in, a fire sign, for example, that could be quite impulsive, right? Whereas opposed to a water Mars, which might be more like indirect in their actions and the way they move towards things. Not necessarily passive aggressive, but there is a passiveness to a water Mars. Would you agree with that?
Mm, yes and no. I would say Mars, not with Mars and Scorpio.
But isn't there an indirectness to Mars and
I
Scorpio,
think,
but like in
yeah,
an
they
artful way?
might have like a more calculated kind of roundabout way of going about what they want. Whereas a Fire Mars is a bit more, I have a Fire Mars. A Fire Mars is a bit more shameless.
Yeah, I have an air Mars. So, what would you say about an air Mars? A fixed air Mars in my case.
An Air Mars is gonna be, I think, a bit more mindful because it is mental. The air
Hmm.
signs rule the mind. So I think they're gonna be a bit more mindful of their actions. And they are able to kind of see how those actions are gonna affect others.
Hmm.
But some air Mars signs could be like very passive aggressive,
Mm.
like Libra Mars, for example.
Or manipulative, yeah. But like logically, I mean, I think with Air Mars, there's this sense of detachment. So I think, when you're talking about making someone angry or, provoking a reaction, I think with an Air Mars, it might be a little bit more difficult because we tend not to take things personally. But that can sometimes come up in the way we move through the world as well. We assume other people don't take it personally either. So that can cause problems. But when it comes to fixed energy, I think would be very much more have an endurance about the way they move. Whereas, cardinal might be more quick paced, likes to go for things quickly and then, next thing.
Yeah, I've seen like fixed Mars, like once they have like a goal in mind or an idea, they're very like unwavering to that.
Mm,
Seen that with fixed Mars. I mean, I see it with you
mm,
and other people I know who have fixed Mars.
hmm.
Um, you don't see that as much with cardinal immutable Mars.
Yeah, cardinal's great at starting things, so I think that can be quite cool. And then mutability or mutable Mars could be more adaptable, right? So making
Yeah,
changes.
mutable Mars. I have a mutable Mars. It's very, I think I'm very, 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 very adaptable. Um,
Mm,
and I could really, I feel like fit in different environments and make myself comfortable. I know how to like snap, like in,
mm.
like, I don't want to say into a different persona, but just like to like make myself comfortable like easily in different
Yeah,
environments.
yeah, that makes sense. I think with the fixed Mars, it's like directly opposite to that. I think they're just kind of move through the world in the same way. It's not always adapting to the environment, which is sometimes needed, actually very often is needed. Yeah, interesting. Venus would definitely be our love, right? The way we love, our values, maybe even our, self-love, our self-esteem in some instances, the way we connect with others. And my personal favorite, Venus is associated with pleasure, how we experience it and how we enjoy our lives. What about you?
all of that, but also attraction. Attraction is a big one with Venus. What we're attracted to, how we attract others. What is it about us that draws in people?
Mm. Hmm. We've
Okay.
heard dress for your Venus sign, right? Would you
Yeah,
agree with that?
100%. 100%. I'm a Scorpio Venus and people just tell me like you look so great in red and black. And I'm like, I think I do. I
Yeah,
think
you do. You
it's
do. And like a little bit more raunchy, or at least like little flavors of sexiness, I think is great with Scorpio, for example, in terms of dress.
little lace here and there, a little bit of an open back,
Hmm.
a little
Hmm.
cleavage,
Hmm.
little like fishnet tights or nah, maybe that's a lot. But you
I
know what
mean,
I mean.
Scorpio Venus could definitely pull it off, you know. I mean, if you're thinking about aesthetics, which is always a fun topic for me, fire signs, I guess, would be more out there, more individual, more expressive in their style, whereas earth signs might be
Bold.
more
I think of
yeah.
with bold, bright colors,
Hmm.
lots of colors.
Also looks great in red, reds,
Maybe.
oranges.
Yeah, pink,
Um, Whereas earth signs, I guess, would be more understated, more practical, more put together,
more neutrals.
more neutrals, more refined, I think. An earth sign looks great with that. Although, for example, with Taurus, Venus in Taurus, you would want to have a little bit of artistic expression as well, just because Taurus is associated with Venus. Yeah.
Mhm.
When it comes to the air signs, so this is quite an interesting one. How would you, aesthetically speaking, how would you associate Venus in an air sign?
I think it's different with each air sign Venus.
Yeah.
Like I think Venus in Libra is very aesthetically focused,
Hmm.
very big on symmetry and things like just meshing together well and working together well. Um, Sometimes their looks could be like a little bit too curated,
Okay.
in my opinion, but like nonetheless they end up looking great.
Hmm.
Um, I think um Gemini Venus, I feel like a bit more cutesy, a bit more cutesy, um, a bit more individual. I feel like they have a very unique style, Gemini
Mm.
Venus, I would say. And then Aquarius Venus, same thing. Very more out there in their fashion tastes, for sure. Maybe a lot of tattoos.
Hmm.
Maybe like very specific, distinct eye makeup. Something that's maybe like signature like
Hmm.
them, you know. Maybe a
Yeah.
certain hair accessory or a certain pair of earrings. Something that stands out, I would say.
Yeah. I think for Aquarius, it's similar because it's, associated with Saturn, Saturn ruled. I think there is this sense of like structure and formality to the way they dress, but there's always a little touch, like you said. It's the eye makeup or it's
There's
tattoos or
always a
something
uniqueness. There's always something that's not quite like
traditional.
run-of-the-mill standard conventional look.
Absolutely. What about the water signs aesthetically?
Mm. I mean, Scorpio is stereotypically a lot of like darker colors, maybe browns, blacks, like purples, maroons, burgundy,
Hmm.
um, you know, darker colors. I think
Hmm.
darker colors, maybe like more like sexy, a little bit of lace, a little bit of skin showing, um, a little bit of like pin-up style, maybe a little bit of that influence. And then Pisces, I think of like very feminine, very feminine style, very feminine style. Um, a lot of skirts, a lot of dresses, a lot of maybe lighter colors, light blues, light pinks, sparkles, maybe. Um, and then Cancer, I think of like florals. I think of more summery looks. I think of a lot of pinks, a lot of purples. Um, white. I feel like Cancer people look good in white as well, like
Mm,
white, off white. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, water Venuses dress how they feel. So I've noticed that they can also be quite changeable. Sometimes
Yes.
they'll be like really baggy clothes, sometimes will be very fitted. Really about how you feel and where you are emotionally, I would say, which is great. I think it's water Venuses are great at expressing outwardly themselves through their fashion and through their vibe, their aesthetic, which is kind of cool. But as we know, the Venus sign is so much more than aesthetics, right? It's the way we love, it's the way we connect. So, for example, I would say, a fire Venus is incredibly passionate. There's this sense of loving people, having their heart on their sleeve, and outwardly expressing that love quite often. Whereas an Earth Venus, I would say, is a little bit more loyal, a little bit more helping create that stability, that foundation with their partners, with their friendships.
Yeah, I've noticed with Earth Venuses, it's like they want to have stability, especially financial stability, like first and foremost before establishing a relationship a lot of the times with someone,
Absolutely.
especially Capricorn Venus. I think Capricorn Venus tends to maybe get married if they do get married like later in life because
Mm,
of to establish that stability financially. Whereas a fire Venus or even a water Venus, that really might not be the first thing they're thinking about.
hmm.
The fire Venus is like the passion, and then I think the water Venus is looking more for the emotional support
Yes.
and the emotional connection and
Hmm.
resonance with that other person.
Absolutely. Air Venus is quite an interesting one. I feel like air Venuses need communication. They need to understand logically why this connection works and why it's happening, I think. And also, they need to feel perhaps that their partner, their friends are intelligent, that they're intellectually stimulating. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. They're more like the sapiosexual types for sure. But there is an element of detachment with the air Venus, especially Aquarius, I would say. Um, Venus and Gemini not as much, but Venus and Libra, Venus and Aquarius, I would say especially Venus and Aquarius, but I feel like there is this detachment with the air Venuses. There is this need for maybe a bit more space. Um, they look at relationships in a more, I think, logical way than other Venus signs do.
Yeah. I mean, I have an air Venus. I have Aquarius, Venus in Aquarius, and genuinely, people get really offended when I say this, but I do feel like relationships are little experiments. Sounds bad, but the truth is that I learn so much through connection. So I see it that way. Like I analyze how I feel and how things are in connection. And I feel like I get something from that. Whereas like a Cancer Venus or even any water Venus would be like,
No, yeah,
oh, that's terrible. How can you say that?
I definitely don't see it like that because for me, it's
Yeah.
like, oh, I've invested my emotional energy
Mm,
into this and my time, and oh, this person maybe wasted my time. Some relationships last years and then they end and they dissipate, and then it's just like, well, there goes 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10+ years of my life. That's how I would look at it.
interesting. I
And
actually
I'm fi- and
love
I'm and
that.
I'm fixed water. So
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, like I want that commitment and that loyalty and that stability, but emotional stability. And I do look at it as an emotional investment and a time investment.
Yeah. No, I love that contrast because you do have that fixed water Venus and I have the fixed air Venus. So we have a unique moment right here to contrast that because in my case it would be, well, we were together for 5, 6, even more years and we learned a lot and now it's not working for us anymore. So it's time to move on and find our next thing that's actually good for us. I think a lot of the time in my connections, I'm thinking, is this good for me? And is this good for them? Is this compatible? Are we both getting somewhat of what we need or what we're looking for from each other? And I think in some ways that can be seen as transactional. And I think there is that issue that comes up, especially in romantic relationships between air and water Venus, for example, or even air and fire.
Yeah,
We consider that as well.
I dated two people with Aquarius Venus actually, and it did not work.
Yeah,
It did not work. I was really attracted to them, and I think they were attracted to me. There was, I guess, the element, and I think Scorpio is a little bit weird, and Aquarius is a little bit weird. So there was the attraction.
for sure.
The problem was not that. It was
Mm,
different, wanting different things and looking at the relationship in different ways. And yeah.
yeah. And those ways of looking at it can make the other feel quite, because there's such a disagreement with it, that can make the other person feel quite unsafe in that connection, because of the motivation, I would say. But if we had to talk about the modalities, for example, that also plays a big role. For example, fixed air, Aquarius, with mutable fire, Sagittarius, can be quite a magnetic combination, right? Because there's this sense of, the mutability of the Venus being wanting freedom, wanting changeability, and then the detachment of the air Venus helping facilitate that and allowing for that. Does that make sense?
And I do think like Aquarius and Sagittarius also like they definitely have like their own way of kind of doing things and seeing things, and they're both kind of more adventurous. So I could see it definitely working for the most part.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But
So
again,
that's a,
it
yeah,
has to be my opinion with love and romance. You got to look at a lot of parts of the chart. Like maybe they have that, but then their moon signs are incompatible and their Mercury signs are incompatible. And you get these people commenting on TikTok videos being like, "Oh, well, my mom has Aquarius Venus and my dad has Sag Venus and they had the most terrible divorce." And it's like, well, that's not the only part. It's not the only component
yes,
of
yes, we have to look at the chart holistically. That's really an important point to knock home as much as we can. You got to look at the whole chart. You got to look at the whole person, and the aspects. It all matters.
even the transits that person A and person B are going through. It impacts the relationship, all of it. I mean, it's a
Mm,
lot to look at the solar return and this and that, like, but it's important.
absolutely, absolutely. All right, so that does conclude the personal planets, and we can move on to social planets. The first one being Jupiter. As I mentioned previously, Jupiter really is associated with our growth, our belief system, where we get opportunities. It might be the area where we feel more optimism or expansion in our
And
lives.
luck, where we might
Yeah,
have been a bit more, where we might have been lucky. I
absolutely.
see it with the Jupiter placement. Like, I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, well, that makes sense.
Yeah. Where do we get our luck and our good fortune? Where do we get our opportunities to make quick and sudden expansion moves, whether it be in our career or in our lives in general?
With Jupiter, yeah. I just think a lot of it is your luck and like but also maybe like the area of life you have to like kind of understand better and kind of master to attract that luck and to kind of utilize in your favor
Hmm.
because it is about like being advantageous and opportunistic in a way um if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely, I connected with opportunity. So, in some ways, it's not really something we have to work for. We can set up the foundations. But, Jupiter, I sort of associate more with like sudden opportunity, things coming towards us in a positive way. But, of course, it can also affect how we gain opportunity, how we work towards those opportunities. For example, a fire Jupiter might be more faith-based. They trust the process. They think things will come, right? Whereas an Earth, Jupiter might be a little bit more practical about how they go towards or accept opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about air and water? What would you say about air, water, Jupiter?
And air and water. I think um with with an air Jupiter, like it could be like some air Jupiter, like for example, Jupiter in Gemini is like I think a tough one. Like we were recently going through that transit for like last year or earlier this year. And it's like I think Jupiter being that it's associated with Sagittarius wants like, you know, to be all in. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? Not to kind of dabble into things. And Gemini is a bit more scattered. And so I think that's an example of a more challenging Jupiter placement. But in general, an air Jupiter, I think, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I was just thinking as you were saying that you know, it is this sense of like opportunity comes to us. But I think Jupiter, depending on the house, the sign, the modality, da 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 da, it can really influence how we attract those opportunities, right? So, perhaps a fire Jupiter would gain opportunity through expression, through living outwardly, boldly, and therefore attracting in those opportunities. Whereas an Earth Jupiter would be, set up your goals and get practical steps towards those
More like
goals.
build and also building like a foundation and all of that,
Right.
like
Whereas an
establishing more
air,
structure and yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Whereas an air sign might be more about study. Study what you want opportunity and know about what you want to gain opportunity
Gaining knowledge.
and
Gain
communicate, network, right? Whereas water signs,
water Jupiter. I have a water Jupiter.
okay.
I think with a water Jupiter, it's just gonna sound really cliche, but I think it's really about like trusting your intuition and your inner guide because water signs like definitely have a lot of that. And I think it's like sometimes they ignore it. And I found that I've like attracted the best in my life when I am like acting more based on my intuition and trusting my gut. To give to feel things have to feel right with the water Jupiter, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's kind of underrated. You hear a lot of very successful people saying, follow your gut, right? And I think with the water Jupiter, that's amplified. Follow your gut, and it might lead you in the right directions and attract those opportunities we were speaking of.
And yeah, like I think with part of like following your gut and intuition is like it goes hand in hand with like living more intentionally.
Hmm.
Like I've found like now it's so strange like this is gonna sound really hard to understand, but like I found now that like for example, let's say I have a plan with someone, but then like I don't know, like something with the timing is off or like it's just maybe it's just not going to work. Like I found like I don't even need to communicate that. Like I feel like it's all telepathic.
Hmm.
And then like it just the plan maybe doesn't happen or it changes to a day that it works out so much better and like the weather is nicer and like the plan goes so much more smoothly and I didn't even need to like communicate that. I just intuitively kind of attracted it. It's really weird. I can't
Yeah.
explain it.
No,
As
I
I get
totally know what you
older,
mean.
it's like happening more and more and more. Like I don't even need to say anything anymore. I don't even need to cancel on people. They will cancel on me and it'll be perfect because it's like, oh my God, this works better for both of us. Like it is the weirdest thing and I've noticed it like getting more and more prominent as I get older. I don't know if I'm making sense.
Yeah. In fact, it's divine timing, right? And it's actually what I was trying to touch on in the Mercury placement. Water signs indirectly. Oh, it wasn't the Mercury, it was the Mars that we were talking about. The water Mars being indirect. It's similar with Jupiter. There is this sense of not directly needing to do something to gain the fortune and the luck from that planet or to use the energy of that planet effectively. So, like, just to backtrack a little bit, Pisces Mars, they can be successful, but they're probably going to do it in an indirectional way, if that's a word. And the same with Jupiter, right? You can gain a lot of opportunity by, as you said, just trusting divine timing, and things working out for you telepathically. It makes total sense with the water energy, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and I really do I want to emphasize that I do think like where the house where it's placed like really could reveal where you attract a lot of luck and opportunities. Like I've had people tell me like, "Oh my God, like you've been really lucky socially. Like you've been really lucky. You've always had very good friends." And I'm like, "Well, I've been burned." But like, yeah, it is true. Like everywhere I've gone, I've made friends like fairly easily. Um, and Jupiter's in my 11th house. It
Hmm.
makes sense, you know?
Yeah.
Then I meet people with Jupiter in their second house and they haven't really, many of them haven't had issues with money, like major issues. And it's like, well, I can't say the same.
Yeah, I
You
got
know,
Saturn in the second house, so do you,
me
so
too, me too. So
a
it's just
little bit
like,
different.
I've been lucky with people, but maybe not with the bag all the time. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have Jupiter in Virgo in my ninth house, and for me, it's very much been very lucky in my travels. I've traveled a lot, and I've met incredible people that have facilitated or made my travels better. But with the ninth house also being about higher education, the more effort I put into learning and educating myself, in terms of the dreams I have, the goals I have, the more I get opportunity. And a silly example would be, my dancing, my burlesque dancing. I don't just do it, right? I learn about it. I've read books, I've listened to podcasts, all of those things, and that deeper, detailed understanding of what I want opportunity in brings me more opportunity. So it's a sense of using that energy to gain more, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. So one important question. I mean, we didn't really talk about the modalities. Did you want to touch on that a little bit?
With Jupiter.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the modalities are quite important with Jupiter for sure. I think a cardinal Jupiter might attract more luck and good fortune, like if they kind of don't hold back and take initiative with things. Maybe like I think doubt in general kills manifestation, but I feel like especially for a cardinal Jupiter, like like a fixed Jupiter may need to feel it out more, but a cardinal Jupiter like kind of has to learn to trust their instincts and kind of go for
Mm.
it, you know.
Yeah.
I think a fixed Jupiter might need to rely a bit more on intuition, a bit more. And I think commitment attracts luck. Commitment, staying power, not giving up,
Hmm.
um, is a way with fixed Jupiter to attract more luck and opportunities. And with mutable, being more flexible, being adaptable. It could be tough if you have a mutable Jupiter, but say a lot of fixed planets in your chart, because it's like the universe is calling on you to be more flexible, but it's not in your nature to be like that.
Good point. Yeah, absolutely. Adapting, changing. Yeah, it's very important with a mutable Jupiter. We have spoken a lot about opportunity and fortune and luck. What about access? When does Jupiter become access instead of, or excess instead of growth and opportunity?
I think when people tend to like overindulge maybe in the
Mm,
traits of their Jupiter sign, like Jupiter and Taurus, maybe that could look like excess materialism, excess pursuit of material gains,
hmm.
focusing only on that, because Jupiter could really amplify the traits of the sign it's in.
Yeah.
Um, Maybe Jupiter and Virgo, that could look like being maybe too critical, being too judgmental, um, being maybe too close-minded to other people and their opinions.
Mm,
Um, Jupiter and Scorpio, it could maybe look like, um, I will admit, I think as a Jupiter and Scorpio person, like I have struggled a bit with like I don't want to say self-victimization, but a little bit, because like I think Scorpio, we could get in a rut. We could get very negative very fast if we don't check ourselves.
Hmm.
So it's just like you can't overindulge in the traits of that sign or that house. You
Yeah.
can't like well, I think maybe with Jupiter in the ninth house, I think a downside to it could be like, I think of like no judgment on them, but I think of like certain like digital nomads. Like it's a great thing to be like living country to country, but it's like you mu they mu there's a fine line between wanting to explore the world and wanting to just like go to another country to escape your problems and invent a new identity.
Absolutely.
Like I think of people that like, oh, like I'm stressed, I'm depressed, like I'm gonna just book another trip
Mm.
and book another trip and
That's
book
me.
another trip. Yeah, but it could become like a bottomless pit,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know. Um,
Same like with Pisces, right? Pisces Jupiter could be like overindulging in substances or delusion, getting a little bit too much in that Neptunian aspect of Pisces. Yeah, I think, as you said, that wherever Jupiter goes, there can be an indulgence. So looking in the sign and looking in the house can indicate where you want to place boundaries in terms of how much you're consuming or how much you're doing of something and how much of it is bringing you opportunity, whereas how much of it is holding you back or causing problems, making life a little bit more difficult in
Yeah,
terms
because
of
it
that.
could just become whatever area of life that is, it could just become a chase, a constant chase and feeling unfulfilled. And that's not the point of Jupiter.
Absolutely. Yeah, if you think about like Jupiter in the fifth house, there can be this tendency to just want to have fun, chasing pleasure. It can be a little bit hedonistic, for example. But on the other side of that, it could also be an opportunity where you could get opportunities in art, opportunities in work that's fun, in things that you enjoy. So I think where Jupiter is great, but it does also call for balance in those areas. And I think especially, in terms of opportunity during transits, Jupiter transits can be quite interesting in terms of opportunity. What do you make of a Jupiter transit?
You know what, though? I've found sometimes Jupiter transits like are not what you think they are. It's really weird. Like I
Hmm.
found like I was working with someone once and they actually got like fired during like a Jupiter 10th house transit. And obviously you have to look at the aspects being made and everything, but I think sometimes it's like it might be a way of like making room for something better that in the moment doesn't look like a true opportunity. It could be an opportunity disguised as something else.
Mm,
But I have seen like Jupiter in the second house, I feel like a lot of the times like the person does get like a financial or material gain.
yeah.
But in the sixth or the 10th house, like of career, the 10th house or the sixth house of work, it might not look like what you think it looks like. I feel like it could
Mm.
manifest in different ways, you know?
Yeah, it's an excellent point. It's true. Jupiter will make space in your life if needed, right? And I think very much so, there can be that sense of indulgence because I guess during those transits, that part of your chart will become a little bit more of a focus, maybe either outwardly in terms of your experiences or even internally being driven towards that aspect of your life, right? So if it's in the seventh house, you might be motivated to work more on your relationship. You might be motivated to leave a relationship. As you said, sometimes we are making space. And I think when we think of opportunity, we think, oh, great, this great opportunity that I can
Gonna
jump
land on my
into.
lap. Like it's just gonna
Right. Which is not always
no.
the case.
No, a
Very
lot of the
much so.
times there's moving parts and there's phases and steps and um because I think like Jupiter is also I don't remember if it's associated with patience or I don't remember. But I feel like it could be because it's
Jupiter associated with patience. Huh.
is it? I have to look.
Okay. I would say Jupiter is associated more with trust.
Faith.
Faith,
trust
yeah.
and faith, but that also kind of involves like patience at times.
Mm. Yeah,
Indirectly.
trusting the process for sure.
Trusting the process, yeah, that's what I'm getting at. Sometimes I have a hard time articulating what I mean.
Mm. Yeah, no, that was brilliant. A good point, really. Yeah, so I think that's kind of what I wanted to conclude with today. If you had anything to add.
No, I think, yeah, covered the first half.
All
Now we have to.
right. Yeah, so that concludes part one of our episode six on the planets. Please tune in next time for part two, where we will be going more into the other planets, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, and stay tuned because we will be talking about some big transits you might be going through or you will be going through for the next couple of months. Thank you so much for listening. Please do be sure to leave us a comment. Tell us about any planets that mean something in your chart, anything that stands out. We'd love to know.
Like, share, and subscribe. It helps us out and it keeps you informed on astrology and the like. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Moon Me, an astrology podcast. We hope our insights inspire you to explore your own path. Join us next week as we dive deeper into the cosmos with Roxy and Izzy.